700 pages of fury. We were taking delivery of all these materials that have been from Golden Harvest and saying, I want to see everything you have on Bruce Lee. I want to see everything you have on Bruce Lee in Game of Death.
So Bey, we're looking at a book here called Bruce Lee and I.
700 pages of fury.
The revised edition.
Yes.
Let's talk to us a little bit about this. So what spurred you to write this book to begin with? A very interesting book. A lot of great information in there. If you're a Bruce Lee fan,
yeah,
a lot of facts that a lot of people won't know.
Well, the first edition of Bruce Lee and I, well, first it sold out completely, and so purely on a business perspective, we could have continued doing a second edition like you do of a book that sells out. But what happened was, I realized that rather than just reprint the old book, there's so much had happened since the publication of the first Bruce Lee and I that I could go back to and change. And you would think when an icon like Bruce Lee passed away 50 years now?
53 years ago.
Yeah, 50 years ago. There wouldn't be anything new. But what did I know? Because it was like they found Game of Death, the original Game of Death footage from the 1973 shoot.
You found out.
I found the mother load of that.
So let's
talk
to us about how did that happen?
I was it was fortuitous. I was working at Media Asia. We were taking delivery of all these materials that had been from Golden Harvest, and I was in a position of authority where I could actually go to the archivists and say, basically the warehouse controllers, and say, I want to see everything you have on Bruce Lee. I want to see everything you have on Bruce Lee in Game of Death. In my case, unusually, I was the random white guy that worked for the company, this big company. So then they had a roll of film that said "Say Mong Yao Hei, Game of Death." And they said, we're not sure what this is. So then they put it up onto, long story short, they mounted it up for me, and I started looking at it and went, whoa, that is the dailies. Now, of course, they'd been seen back in 1978 when they did the version that Robert Klaus did. They'd been used for Bruce Lee, The Man, the Legend, the documentary. But they basically sat there, and there was a very real possibility that if I hadn't discovered them, they would have been bulldozed into oblivion, like a lot of things I think that were at Golden Harvest Studio when they closed down. So then, fortunately, I got my hands on it, and then I, in my infinite wisdom, was going, well, this is all there'll ever be, and this is why you're never going to see this log scene when Dan Inosanto fights Get Yoon, and Get Yoon has this big log. You're never going to see that. And here's why. And this footage is gone forever. You're never going to see that. And guess what? Arrow Video did this incredible Blu-ray re-release and restoration with all that footage. They found the additional footage all these years on, and they did this incredible documentary. The only thing missing from it, for whatever reason, was they failed to credit me with finding the footage in 1997.
So now,
that was the year my eldest son was born, so it was a good year for me.
So is it true that Arrow found a master in Italy or somewhere?
You see, this is a question you need to have I have no relationship with Arrow. My only involvement was I bought the Blu-ray, and in researching the new version of Bruce Lee and I watched the fact that they found this, what they call the Mandarin version of Big Boss. It's not really the Mandarin. Every version was Mandarin. Every film was dubbed into Mandarin in those days, including the Bruce Lee films. But they had like this earlier cut of the Big Boss that was on there, which I'd never seen before. And they had all of this Game of Death footage. obviously I knew the material that I'd found in 1997, but I hadn't seen the log scene or whatever. And as I say, I watched it with absolute fascination. I commend them. I think as historians, I was a little bit put out not to eat that my footnote was not mentioned, but then that's the pleasure of coming onto this podcast, and I can actually set the record straight. And anybody who has the box set, just right on the back in black magic marker, just say game of death footage found by Bey in 97. That's the truth. Other things that had happened, there was that trove of information. There were some errors, silly things, like, for example, my friend Steve Kerridge corrected me of the location at the end of Big Boss when they did pickup shots in Hong Kong at the end of Big Boss when they're doubling for the boss's mansion. I had it down as I'd have to go back and look at the book, but I had one location. In fact, it was another. I cut back. I thought there was some extraneous material and some typographical errors in the first edition, so I got to correct those. The most difficult thing for me that I had to address as a historian, because the thing is, and this goes to what I just said about Arrow Video, we're all entitled to opinions about people, about things, about but historians and writers, you're not entitled to your own facts. Facts happen. People do things. Maybe it's inconvenient who the person is or the facts that happen. So when these drug letters came up relevant to Bruce Lee, I wanted them to be false because they are really inconvenient to me to have to acknowledge that my idol maybe was taking all these illicit substances. I realized it probably was true because dear Shannon Lee never came out and said this is all lies. I was waiting for her to come out and lambast the estate of the late Bob Baker for bringing out these letters. But I have to believe, as he was experimenting in every other area of life, Bruce seems to have been experimenting with these drugs as well. So I had to talk about that in the context of a subject which I kind of did to death with the History Channel documentary, The Death of Bruce Lee.
Scenario is like one of the classic locked room mysteries. Bruce dies. Bruce is the one that ended up dead. Betty must be the one responsible because there was nobody else there.
Which was the reasons why Bruce Lee passed away. And I had my own theory, and I then have to kind of let that go, because if he really was taking these substances, perhaps these contributed to his untimely passing as well. So there was just a lot of new footage and a lot of new things.
Remove your sweat glands.
Sweat glands is a symptom idea of like, if I need to achieve a goal, I don't mind what it costs. I'm going to do it. If nobody else has done it, that's fine. I'm going to be the first one.
Did Bruce's decision to have the sweat glands removed from his armpits leave him unable to control a critical biological process?
And even after Bruce Lee and this version came out, there's still more information, still more material about Bruce Lee that's kind of being found.
After Bruce Lee first stops breathing, Betty summons Raymond Chow. Raymond Chow inexplicably tells Betty not to call an ambulance.
Raymond had seen Bruce suffer a similar episode just 2 months prior, so it's very strange that he would wait so long to get urgent care for him.
So I think I might do a third. When this one sells out, which is going to be soon, I'll do a third edition.
So if someone wants to buy this book,
yes, please go to www.reeleast.com. Reeleast is spelled R-E-E-L-E-A-S-T. That's R-E-E-L-E-A-S-T.com. We have this and other books of mine. We've even found some copies of the first edition. So there was one box left. So I'm wrong in saying it's sold out. I thought it sold out before I did this, before I did the new edition. But when we were in the process of moving out of our old offices, I found one box. So we have some of those available. And so I feel, without Bruce Lee, not to find a point on it, I wouldn't be sitting here where we are now, James, at New Era Martial Club. I wouldn't have my 5 wonderful Eurasian children. I wouldn't have the relationship I have with Elizabeth. Maybe I wouldn't even know you.
And I probably wouldn't be in Hong Kong checking out locations with my Wing Chun Seafood Calvin Chun.
Because it does go back to John Lennon saying, before Elvis there was nothing. Yeah. And before Bruce, it was a transformative figure in so many people's lives, and certainly in mine. I can see a direct line between seeing just an image of Bruce Lee in whatever year this would have been, like 1973, 74, he already passed on. So it must have been post 73. And from there until now, where I'm still talking about him, still fascinated by him. I mean, just the other day, I was, I don't know if you ever do this, but I was just flicking idly on YouTube in the evening, just before going to bed. And there's Bruce versus Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
And rest in soul, the great. Rest in peace, the great Chuck Norris.
I was just going to bring that up. That fight scene between Bruce
still
and Chuck is arguably the greatest fight scene ever put in cellular.
Oh yeah, I think it's just an incredible feat. Bruce having the vision to set it in the Coliseum, to have the foresight to say, okay, I'm going to fight a, because originally they were going to use Chan Sing, who was this muscular Chinese.
Weren't they going
actor.
to originally use Joe Louis?
I don't think it was specifically Way of the Dragon or Return of the Dragon, whichever you want to call it. But Bruce had said to Joe, I'm going to use you in a movie to be the bad guy. And I think Joe, they had issues anyway, but in their friendship. But Joe, I think, dismissed it out of hand because Joe Louis, if you know of him.
Joe Louis told me it was Bruce had actually, in 2003 or 4.
Yeah.
Joe Louis, because I asked him about this, he said Bruce actually approached him for that fight scene.
Oh, wow.
Dragon.
Then maybe I misremember.
And Joe Louis told me that he made the biggest mistake. It was like he turned it down, but his reason for turning it down was that he wasn't prepared as a world champion to be defeated by a guy who he claimed was not a world champion fighter.
Right. Yeah, so
he told me that. I remember it very vividly. He told me that in the Rose Cafe after a workout at Gold's Gym.
I spent quite a bit of time with Joe Louis, and I always have a huge respect for him as a martial artist, as an athlete. I just felt like a lot of these guys, like George Lazenby or Conan Lee, or all the should have beens of martial culture, pop culture, they're their own worst enemy.
But also, the interject, sorry, I think looking at Joe Louis, his performance in Force 5, Chuck Norris was a better pick for Bruce and Way of the Dragon.
Oh yeah. Well, I think you what you have to do when you make the transition, and you can relate to this because you're such an accomplished martial artist who's done film action, is I think, and you can bear me out if this is true or not, I think it's much harder to unlearn than to learn. So if you get actors and you say, do this, kick, punch, they can pick it up if they're physical. If you have martial artists who spent many years doing things a certain way, and you say, now you're going to unlearn that, and you're going to empty your cup, and you're going to do it. Some people can and some people can't. And Benny Akides was very good at doing that, about unlearning what he was doing in the ring to do action with Jackie Chan. And maybe I shouldn't say their names, but there's other people who are very highly accomplished martial artists have tried to segue into film, and they can't. It's not they're not great martial artists, they are. It's just they can't.
It doesn't translate on the
right. And I think there was. I never saw anything in. I thought even with Jaguar Lives, his first film, that he first leading role, he showed his limitations. By the way, there's a scene in Macau when he's doing backflips outside the church. You know that's Chinois.
It's Chinois
with a blonde wig.
Really?
Doubling for Joe. I asked Chinois about that.
Surprised.
You know what? The thing is, we were just talking about Chinois, who was like, he's in recent times he's known as the bad guy from Dragons Forever, and
please don't kill me. I don't want to die. No, Mr. Wan, no! I won't kill you, not me.
From Eastern Condors, and he was the landlord in Kung Fu Hustle, and he was Bruce Lee's stunt double. But we actually saw him the other day, and he's done and experienced so much. However long you talk to Chinois, you never. By the way, I interviewed him, and I said, for just a little KOL thing, and I said at the end of it, is there anything you haven't done? And he goes, no, I've done everything I want to do. And I think he's right.
He seems to be in a good place.
Award-winning actor, double for Bruce Lee. He's choreographed. He's done this. He's done that.
He looks fantastic.
He does.
Question: even though Enter the Dragon the dungeon scenes. It's fabulous. Bruce is
Right.
It's the greatest demonstration of a bunch of different martial arts, from Kali to empty hands,
Yes.
to the staff, to the nunchucks, and so on. But I still don't feel that we got a fight scene in Enter the Dragon on a one-on-one like we got between Bruce and Chuck in Way of the Dragon.
I was always
Why is
disappointed that he didn't let Bob Wall have more of a fair shake.
Is it that Bob didn't have the physical capabilities like Chuck, or just was it?
I actually think it's a lot harder to jump back kick over a guy who drops to the floor and kicks you right in the nads. That's harder to do than doing punching kicks like he was doing in Way of the Dragon. So sadly, the only people who we could ask about it are Bruce and his co-choreographer Lam Ching Ying from Enter the Dragon, why it was that way.
Or do you think it was a production schedule thing?
No, I think Bruce could have done. Nobody was chasing or rushing Bruce. Bruce was doing. I think what Bruce was doing, which I think is one of the reasons Enter the Dragon stands the test of time, is he so brilliantly adapted what he was going to do to kind of like an international platform, an international vehicle. I mean, if you look at his script notes, when he was, after the film was finished, he was going to do this whole elaborate sequence at the Shaolin Temple and Carter Wong, and people would be doing kung fu forms, and you go through this waterfall and whatever. And I think he looked at it and goes, "No, I don't think people are going to go for that. That's too out of the realm. We'll have a what turned out to be an MMA match." And it's interesting because, I mean, on the more recent appearance, somebody was accosting me in the comments for saying Bruce was the father of MMA. And my point is not that he was a competitive champion in MMA. MMA means, as far as I know, means mixed martial arts.
Right.
And at the time that Bruce Lee came on the scene, basically boxers box, punchers punch, grapplers grapple, and never the twain shall meet. That was how things were. And kickers would say boxing doesn't work. Boxing would say kicking doesn't work. And grapplers would say, once we get our hands on any of you, you're done. And what Bruce said was, you cannot have an effective segment of a totality. You have to have effectiveness at every range of combat, which is MMA. And then he stages a prototype match at the beginning of Enter the Dragon. With the shorts and the gloves, which no one had seen, and it ends in a submission. A grappling submission. So I have a hard time with people making an argument that he shouldn't be considered the spiritual father of MMA. And the thing about Bruce Lee that always confounds me is everybody always goes, well, we have to be really pure to where Bruce Lee was at in 1973 when he passed away.
He was 50 years ahead of himself.
Well, my point is, if you're really going to be fair, and you're going to say, well, if Bruce Lee fought the MMA champions today, no, the Bruce Lee of today, if we're saying he was a young, active fighter in 2026, he would have access to all of the training, all of the nutrition, whatever was necessary to kind of like fulfill his potential today that he had in 1973.
But his body is in pain right now.
About the hands.
Oh! Knocked down for the Kiwi! Oh, that's a big shot. Alvarez getting loose, getting better here in this round, though.
Oh, man.
Until that.
Oh, he's... strength and conditioning floor here. The entire first floor of this facility is performance optimization based, so strength and conditioning, physical therapy, nutrition, we've hit on some of those.
Really stand out to us as a team.
So to me, it's a bit of a, if you're talking about this guy who's constantly evolving, why did he have to stay frozen in 73? And you judge him by that and you say, well, in 1973, he couldn't have beaten the champions we have today. I mean, there are areas, I don't know if you agree with me, I think many of the 70s heavyweight boxing champions could beat the boxers we have today. So it's not always the case. But in general, things get more demanding.
I think as a fighter, you're going to win some and lose some, no matter who.
There is that.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
You're not going to be undefeated.
But I think the fact that Bruce came out and said, we're going to have these different ranges of combat, and in almost all his films, I think all the films he lived to make, he showed the grappling range of combat,
yes, he did.
which had rarely been seen.
He was 50 years ahead of himself, and for what he was doing at that time, that fight scene there in the Dragon is a predecessor to MMA today.
Well, I remember when I was editing Combat Magazine in England, and the boss of the magazine, I don't know if he's still with us, was a guy called Mike Haig, and I had a cover story with Larry Hartzell, who I don't know if you ever met Larry. He's one of Dan Santo's students, Bruce Lee students, and then with Dan. And he was, maybe I misspeak, I think he was a Bruce Lee student, but I believe he trained with Dan after Bruce's passing. And he focused on grappling.
He's also an Ed Parker Kempo black belt.
That's right. So he had I had him on the cover, and he had this big belly, and he's got these knee pads, and he was doing a kind of like a chicken, is it a chicken wing? Whatever.
Well, I don't know.
Those kind of grappling holds.
Yeah.
Grappling holds, I mean. And Mike came, what is this? What is this? And I said, this is the future. Because it's not always that you do a magazine cover that shows you where we're at or where we've been. This grappling, even I could see this is going to be part of the future. And this guy is ahead of the curve, because when Larry came to do his Jeet Kune Do seminars, he didn't focusing. He was good at boxing. He was good with the pads. He was okay with the stick. But his big thing was the grappling. Yes, it was. So the fact he was coming in and saying to all of these martial arts guys, hey, you know what? You got to work on grappling. This is before the Gracies, before the Machados became world famous. They probably were already doing it.
Oh, they've been doing it forever.
But they weren't known globally before the UFC. The Larry was one. So this is something where I think people have to look at where we're going, and they have to say, okay, if somebody was alive today, it's like, if you're restoring old films, and that's great, and you make them like they were in the day. If you imagine how they would be done today, they wouldn't be done like that. They would be done using the technology that's available.
What do you think Enter the Dragon would look like today?
Well, I think we're going to find out what Bloodsport looks like, because they're working on this remake at the moment, right? But I think it would be, I think the technology of the filmmaking could be enhanced because of what we can do today in terms of shooting and post-production. But I think it's pretty close to being a perfect martial arts action thriller. So I don't know if it would be much improved. I think it would be more interesting to go back. John Huston said a great thing. He says, why do they remake the great movies? Why not remake the bad ones till they get them right? It's more interesting if you go back to a film that doesn't really work and you go, well, that was a great idea, but it didn't really work. Maybe we could, like something like Master of the Flying Guillotine. So let's do that again now. Oh, maybe that did work, but I mean, just a film that had great potential,
yes, but didn't just hit the mark.
But sometimes you get films that are really ahead of their time, and they try to do stuff effects-wise that wasn't quite there yet. And you go, boy, if we did that again now, we could actually nail it. So that's what I think they should do. They should go back and find movies that had great potential and redo them rather than remake them. I mean, I've got great trepidation about Bloodsport, but I guess we'll see.
We'll see.
All right, brother. Take care.
Very much.